Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ministers, for your statements. I suppose at this stage a lot has been answered, but I suppose, Minister, what I want to ask you for is flexibility around the numbers in schools. I just want to give you a case in point around a Jet school in Fahy in Westport. So they've seen the numbers increase hugely in the last few years, but at present they have 114 pupils on the roll, and that will guarantee them the appointment of a new teacher next year. However, there's an unexpected large number of new entrants this year, with the result that they now have 36 pupils in junior and senior infant school, and they have 31 in the first and second year classrooms. So I suppose because we're still in the pandemic, and because we're trying to make schools as safely as possible, I would ask that cases like that could be looked at to see if we can address the situations in those schools so that we don't have 36 pupils and 31 pupils in the same classrooms and teachers trying to manage them. So just some flexibility around that would be really good. And I just want to ask you, I very much welcome that you said that in your statement around the additional administrative leave days for principals. How are the decisions made around that to provide for substitution arrangements? So just how is that decided? And the other thing I just wanted to ask you was in relation to, because obviously we need more teachers to meet the demand that we have, but we've seen the primary teaching CAO points are now as high as 522, largely because the cap on the undergraduate places. And the reason that you've previously given for the cap is to control supply. But what happens in reality if students are pushed onto the master courses, which are predominantly in one very expensive private college that now trains approximately half of the teachers? So this is something I'll be asking the committee here, obviously, to look at. But when will you be signing off on the intake figures for the academic 2022-2023? Because I know this is something that certainly needs changing. I have a number of other questions, but I realise I have a very limited time on that. So maybe just to address those two first.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy. Just in terms of you know, the instance that you might raise where there are high class numbers at primary school level, I'd have to say to you that pupil-teacher ratio as a consequence of work done in the previous budget are at an historical low in terms of pupil-teacher ratio. But notwithstanding that, I want to acknowledge, you know, that we'll say, for example, and I'm not au fait with the specific case that you raised now, but just in terms of generally speaking, where there are exceptional situations and exceptional occasions in schools or whatever, there is an appeals process just for that specific instance in terms of teacher allocations, and it's very clearly published. There's a circular with the necessary criteria and all of that, and so just to be very clear that opportunity does exist for all schools in terms of exceptional circumstance. Just in terms of your question in relation to how the allocation is made for the administrative principals, and I want to say just in relation to that has been hugely embraced by the school principals, and it has worked particularly well last year, and I was extremely pleased that I was in a position to ensure that would follow through this year. And specifically how it works is that the schools would form a cluster, and then the schools themselves would agree amongst themselves where the substitute individual is based, and you know, what days are allocated or days are used throughout the cluster, and that has been the experience of it. You know, last year, and it continues this year, so that there is an agreement around, you know, the planned day that would, or the release day that would suit the principals within that cluster, and obviously there must be engagement and agreement and negotiation, I suppose, in relation to that within the cluster. Just in terms of the final point you raised, Deputy, was in relation to the points. Oh yeah, the elevated points, we'll say, for prime. I don't have control over the points aspect of it, obviously, like, you know, it varies from year to year, and and that's the nature of it. And I know that, you know, that can be difficult and particularly demanding for students who wish to pursue a particular pathway. But in terms of the other work that needs to be done in terms of allocation and caps going forward, that will be done in due course. I can't give you the specific date as yet, Deputy, but I will. Quite happy to keep you updated on it.
Yeah, I think it's a really important issue. And Minister, just in terms of the inflation grades, or the grades that we saw this year, we saw the situation where we have the lottery system. I suppose my question is, you know, have you provision made that this would never happen again? Leaving Cert students right at the moment are thinking, if we do our maximum effort and we get maximum points, we're still not guaranteed a place that we want to. And I know you would agree that this is desperately unjust and something that we cannot stand over.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Yeah, Deputy, look, I do want to acknowledge, and I know this from experience myself, that Leaving Certificate Day brings great joy and it can bring disappointment for some. CAO Day can bring great joy and it can bring disappointment for some as well. And I do want to acknowledge that. But notwithstanding that, and I've already outlined it, this past year and the previous year have been extraordinary years in extraordinary circumstances. And I do think for the class of 2021, it is their achievement that they did manage to sit a Leaving Certificate system that involved the accredited grades and the written exams. It was an extraordinary, unprecedented measure, almost unique in the world that they had that opportunity, but it was important that they would have it. And I'm very proud that schools facilitated it, staff facilitated it, and students engaged with it. Notwithstanding that, next year will be a different year, but I am mindful that, as I have said previously, that the class of 2022, as they will be, also had an absence of in-person teaching and learning. Accommodations are being made for them as well, in terms of exam papers and all of that, so that that they will have a similar accommodation. And we would hope, as I have said, that will be the limit of the experience of closure and everything else going forward. I don't have control over the CEO points. That is a system that unfolds. But what I am saying is that we are working towards a return to our school with accommodation made for previous absence in school, but return as normal as possible going forward for the students.
Thank you very much.